ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Namaskar, my dear friends. This video I am making on Brahma Vidya or Atma Vidya or knowledge of the self. This video is based on the knowledge of the self described in Brihadarnayaka Upanishad. It is the biggest Upanishad. The self-knowledge is explained in a very wonderful and detailed way. So I start the video. In the beginning, this world was only the self, Atma. Self means Atma, in the shape of a person. Looking around, he saw nothing else than the self. He first said, I am soham. It is a Sanskrit word. Sa means that, aham means myself, I am that. It means I am Brahma. There is no difference between Atma and Brahma. In the actual sense, our Atma is the Brahma. Soham is the first speaking of the Absolute itself. The word Absolute is used for God, the omnipotent God. The expression of the knowledge and knowing of the self. Soham is the name, embodiment of the primeval being, the self of the universe and self of our selves. Soham is the consciousness of Brahma and of the self of each one of us. We too are Soham. In the section of the Yoga Sutras, chapter 1, stanza 27, dealing with Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, also known as Viraj, Patanjali makes this statement, tasya vachkaha parnavaha. Vachka means speech, parnavaha means Om, omnipotent Lord. His vachka is the parnava. Vachka means speech or speaking. Parnava means life, life giver and breath principle, the breath word. It is commonly thought of as Om, but integrating this with the verse we have been considering, we see that the breath word is Soham. For he first said Soham. Patanjali continues regarding the Parnava, its constant repetition and meditation is the way from it the result. The disappearance of obstacles to enlightenment and turning inward of consciousness. Soham is the breath and life word. Ishvara speaks Soham as the foundation of the universe, as the evolutionary life force within the cosmos and every individual being. This is a key verse in the Upanishad as it relates to both the philosophy of our true nature and the interior yogic process by which we realize it. What is our true nature? Peace and bliss is our real nature. That means real nature of each and every individual is bliss and eternal peace. We invoke our lower self when we say I. But in meditation, we invoke our higher divine self when we mentally intone Soham in time with the breath. See, our ego is known as our lower self and our Atma is known as the higher self. We have to understand this. I, this is false I, ego. The primary thought is I thought, known as ego. So this ego is known as lower self and the Atma is known as the higher self. See why the name lower self is given to ego? Because ego is part of Atma only. When thoughts arise from the Atma, these thoughts only constitute our mind and ego. So both ego and mind are originated from the Atma. So when we say a person is self-realized, it means his mind and ego goes back to their source, that is Atma, residing in the spiritual heart. So both mind and ego merge with Atma and we say the person is self-realized or liberated. So we have to understand these terms very clearly. So when we inhale and hum when we exhale. So during breathing in, the sound comes as a so, and when breathing out, the sound comes hum. So in the process of breathing, so and hum both are occurring. So occurs at the time of inhaling, hum occurs at the time of exhaling. So Soham is also one of the mantra for self-realization. In the 16th verse of Isha Upanishad, it says, I am that puruṣa. I am Soham. Puruṣa is the name of God, Brahma. And he says, Atma and Brahma are not separate from each other. So he says, I am, that means Atma is Brahma. At that time, this universe was undifferentiated. It became differentiated by name and form. He, the self, Atma, entered in here as a razor is hidden in the razor case, or as fire in the fire source. The self is to be meditated upon, for in it all these become one. At that time, this universe was undifferentiated. It became differentiated by name and form. At first, only undifferentiated unity existed, but inherent in it was all relative existence. Consequently, it expanded into the cosmos, causal, astral, and physical, which is nothing but endless variations of name, nāma, and form, rupa. So we have to understand, see, this causal, astral, and physical. Our body is having three main parts. The first part, physical, which is visible. Second part is astral. It is constituted by our mind, ego, 10 pranas, buddhi, etc. Causal. So this is the, in Hindi we call it as Karan Sarira. So this is the spiritual part of our body. This could only be true because the universe is fundamentally ideational, conceptual in nature, and only an idea or dream in the consciousness of God and all sentient beings. Everything we see or experience is a thought in the minds of God and ourselves. That's why liberation can only be a matter of awakening, of the transformation of consciousness. Even good deeds are really just good thoughts. Thought and act are the same thing. However, differently they may seem to us who are asleep in the dream. Enlightenment is living awake in the dream. See the recording of Paramhansa Yogananda awake in the cosmic dream. This is why all true yoga takes place solely in the mind. Even if we experience physical phenomena during its practice, and the result we are after are purely psychological. This is a major fact for yogis to know. The only way we can manage in the world of duality is to acknowledge and deal with name and form as realities, which they are, but only temporary ones. It is when we think they are all there is to life here or hereafter that we get into delusion, and the misery of samsara begins and lasts long through creation cycles. To awaken from the dream and be free is an option open only to the yogi who knows I am Soham. Meditation on that which is not the self is pointless. Leaving name and form behind, we must begin with the invocation of non-dual reality, that in the beginning was Soham. That self is dearer than everything else and is innermost. Nothing that is finite and external to us can satisfy us, because the only reality is infinite and within us, and that infinite and inmost entity is our own self. Those who seek the self as not just the highest but the only good certainly see the world around them in a manner totally opposite to those who do not hold the self as dearer than everything else and innermost. Whoever worships another divinity than his self, thinking that he is one and Brahma another, he knows not. So, as per non-dual Advaita, self and Brahma both are the same, there is no difference. If we begin with ignorance, we will end up with ignorance. Those who approach spiritual life with any perspective other than the truth of their identity with the self and the supreme self, Brahma, will not come to the knowing that is really self-realization. The awakening into the consciousness of the self and Brahma, the self of the self. Even if one performs a great and holy work, but without knowing this, that work of his is exhausted in the end. One should meditate only on the self as his true world. The work of him who meditates on the self alone as his world is not exhausted, for out of that very self he creates whatever he desires. All that we attain outside the knowledge of the self will melt and vanish away. This is the simple truth. Therefore, Brahmgyana knowledge of the self should be the central pursuit of our life. Only a matter of days before commenting on this verse, I read in a book of the teachings of Sri Gajanan Maharaj, a great 20th century master yogi, that the yogi who applies himself to sadhana for the realization of the self becomes himself the granter of all his desires. The great teacher Ajatstru was asked by a man named Gargaya to teach him the truth about Brahma. Ajatstru agrees, and this is what occurred. Taking him, Gargaya, by the hand, he rose. The two together came to a person who was asleep. They addressed him with these names: great, white-robed, radiant Soma. The man did not get up. He woke him by rubbing him with his hand. He then got up. Occasionally, in the Upanishads, we find humor used to make a point, and this is one of them. Coming across a sleeping man, Ajatstru addressed him as the divine self, great, white-robed, radiant Soma, but it did no good, for the man was unconscious. It was pointless to address him at all. In the same way, all the positive, affirming and philosophizing are worthless if the speaker and the hearers are spiritually asleep. Such sleepers do not need high-sounding words about the self. They need to awaken. So, Ajatstru shook him until he woke up. We need to be shaken up to awaken and see with our real eyes and hear with our real ears. Otherwise, nothing meaningful will go on. The truth being spoken to us means nothing if we are not awake to hear it. Yoga is the great awakener. Other factors can disturb our sleep. Get us to open our eyes a bit and then go back to sleep and just mumble and turn over and sleep on. But yoga alone fully awakens us. All the religion and piety mean absolutely nothing if we are all the religion and piety means absolutely nothing. Here piety means purity. Mean absolutely nothing if we are not awakened clear in the mind. Verily, not for the sake of all is all dear, but all is dear for the sake of the self. Verily, it is the self that should be seen, heard of, reflected on, and meditated upon. Verily, by seeing of, by the hearing of, by the thinking of, by the understanding of the self, all this is known. The self, Atma, is of the nature of bliss, Ananda. When something makes us happy. It is not the thing itself that is the source of happiness, but rather the touch of the joy, that is the self, which we experience. Actually, our response to that thing opens the barrier between us and the self for a while, and like the light coming through the shutter of a camera, we get a flash, a glimpse of the bliss of self. What we are really valuing is that touch of the self, but in our ignorance, we think those objects are the source. Therefore, it really is because of, for the sake of the self, that they are thought by us as a dear. The wise seek to know the self through study, deep thought, and meditation upon the self. And we are assured that by the seeing of, by the hearing of, by the thinking of, by the understanding of the self, all this is known. To know the self is to know everything. To not know the self is to know nothing. As a lump of salt thrown in water becomes dissolved in water, and there would not by any of it to cease forth as it were, but wherever one may taste it, it is salty indeed. So verily, this great being, infinite, limitless, consists of nothing but consciousness, Brahmgyana. Nothing exists but infinite, limitless consciousness, Brahma. There is no place or no thing that is not essentially consciousness. The self-realized person perceives this directly and continuously. The enlightened individual does not go into a kind of non-dual coma in which nothing is perceived. Rather, those who know Brahma still hear and see names and forms as before, but now they know that they are seeing only the Supreme Self. They do not just believe that, they perceive that to be so. Only the one remains, however many things might be seen in the cosmic dream. This shining, immortal person who is in this earth, and with reference to oneself, this shining, immortal person who is in the body, he indeed is just the self. This is immortal, this is Brahma, this is all. That means our Atma resides in our spiritual heart, and this Atma is another name of Brahma. So I end this video here. The next video will continue on the same topic of Atmagyan or Brahmagyan, of the knowledge of the self, based on Brihadarnayaka Upanishad. So second video will start with this last paragraph of the first video, this shining immortal person. Thank you, my dear friends, for watching this video. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Namaskar.